Have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tokimaru and I'm here to have a look at Rana Card. This game was developed by VisionRana. I believe this is their first game, published by IndieArc, who I believe is a company that primarily specializes in localizing to and from Chinese. This is a rogue-lite deck builder with a little bit of a twist. I know there have been a lot, and I mean a lot of roguelite deck builders, just in general. But this one's a little bit different. It has a really interesting twist. This is a farm management game. I was initially going to say farming sim. It's not really a farming sim. It's a farm management game. You can see I'm having fun on the main menu here. I have about 8 to 10 hours in this game. I have about 8 to 10 hours in this game. I have not been... So, as you may know, I love roguelite games, especially roguelite deck builders. I have not been so enthralled by a roguelite deck builder for a while. Not since... I was going to say... Not since Monster Train and Slay the Spy, but that's wrong because Balatro is like one of the most amazing games of all time. But this is quite good. It's quite a good game. I'm starting to get really addicted to this game. Let's just start by jumping into the options menu. Let's start by jumping into the options menu. So for our main options, we have, you can restart the tutorial, which I will do right after we take a look at the options menu. You have language. This is only in Chinese and English because I believe they're a Chinese company and then they were published by IndieArc for localization into English. And we have a few things that are specific to game mechanics in this game. So part of this game is built around drawing cards. You don't really have a deck. You have like a bag of cards. And there's a lot of RNG in this game, but I suppose if you're not interested in RNG and looking for a more skill-based experience, you do have these two options specifically for mitigating certain kinds of RNG. And you'll see when we get into the game, there are actually more ways of adjusting your RNG preferences, or one more way at least. So it's quite good. It's quite interesting. I've been enjoying it with the base amount of RNG so far, but it's fantastic that you can turn that off. Maximum number of products on the field. This is for performance. I'm not worried about that. We have graphics. We have display mode, borderless windowed, full screen, and if I switch this to windowed or borderless windowed, we'll have resolution options, which is very good, free resize. Max FPS goes from 3060, 144. I would prefer if they had an option for uncapped FPS, but that's still pretty decent amount of options. And a few animation-based options. I will say, I do think, so I think I've said this before, but I think if you have this sort of CRT type filter over the screen, I do think it would be beneficial to have the option to turn that off. Even though I like it, I think just having the option to turn that off would be nice. We have sound options. We have 3 volume sliders, volume, music, sound effects. All in all, pretty good. And over here, we have, the only thing we have here is, so this is primarily a mouse-driven game, obviously. It's a roguelike deck builder, so what you're going to be doing is moving cards around, targeting things with your mouse. However, there are additional keyboard shortcuts for when you eventually get into the rhythm of the game and want to start speeding through it quickly. Because I do think the way the game is designed, I do think they want you to be moving through it pretty quickly once you get experienced enough, and you'll see why in a moment. So let's jump into the tutorial because there are a few very strange and slightly different mechanics that I do think made the game interesting, but they do warrant a little bit of an explanation. So the theme of this game, you're not just a farmer, you're working for the Time Tech Corporation. And I don't know if I would say this is a problem with the game, but it is it took me a second to like I don't know if I would say wrap my head around, but it sort of didn't feel as though it meshed super well for me, but maybe that's just a personal preference. So you're working for a company called Time Tech Corporation, managing a farm. And I think the only reason for that is to basically explain the main mechanic of the game, which they'll explain in a second. It is the time bar. So here we have the bag. Okay, actually, this is an annoyance that I've had with the tutorial. So you see these pop-ups that tell you what to do as you're going through the tutorial. They go automatically until they reach a certain point, and what often happens is if you're not paying attention for half a second, like you might be if you're recording a video, the bubble disappears before you get a chance to read it, and there's no way to go back. You can skip through a bunch of these dialogue boxes, but there's no way to go back and read something that you might have missed. It's a minor pet peeve. I would prefer it if they just left them up for you to go through at your discretion. So this is the bag. It's basically the same thing as a deck of cards. There's functionally no difference between the bag and the deck of cards. However, I do think it is an adorable little aesthetic choice. So these are the cards. The goal of the game is to put plants down onto the field, and over time we will harvest them. So here we have the growth cost, and I suppose it'll explain it. So what happens is, oh God. What happens is cards have a growth cost, and they won't grow unless you either play cards or use abilities from other plants to increment the growth cost. And I wish I could zoom in on this. Give me 1 second. Are we good? Yeah, okay. So if we look over here, its harvest is gain 3. So that only happens when you increment the growth bar up to 3, and then you will gain 3 gold. So in order to do that, we have to go through the soul tutorial. You can also sell plants. Excellent. So this is actually the main mechanic. I guess I'll explain things more specifically as we go through the game. So this is the time pressure gauge. So what this game does that's very interesting, that I think is really cool, that I've played another roguelite card game which I enjoyed, that also has a very similar sort of resource mechanic in it. Basically, instead of the way traditional card games work, most card games sort of just take from Magic, where you need a certain amount of mana to be able to play a card. So you usually have a hand of like 1, 2, or 3 cost cards maybe, such as in Slay the Spire, and you can only play a certain number of cards per turn based on the amount of mana that you have. However, in this game, what it does is you can play as many cards as you want per turn, but each card has a time cost, which is a cost that increments the time gauge when you draw it. So you can see this has a time cost of 2, which means when I draw it, the time gauge will go up by 2, and we have a total of 3. Give me a second, so I can play this. We can immediately harvest 1 plant. Usually this would take 6 harvest growths. It's called growth. I don't know. It's weird to explain. Normally this would take 6. You would need to grow it 6 times for you to be able to harvest it. We can harvest it immediately using this card, which we get to play for free because there's no cost in this game other than the time cost. And if we had another 1 cost card, that would get us to 3. And then there is a little bit of a punishment. However, I think they do a really good job at making it not exactly a punishment for overdrawing, because there are many different kinds of cards and plants that actually give you benefits from that. And I actually won a previous round using mostly plants that benefit from me overdrawing. So this is another kind of weird thing about this game. There are a lot of cards in this game that just say do a random thing. So this is increase the growth of a random plant by 1. So can I play it? Yeah, it'll randomly pick 1 plant to do that on. And I can do that with all these cards because these all say increase the growth of a random plant by 1. But this is the thing, this is an interesting thing this game does, is that since the cards have no cost, they also made a lot of the cards in this game do random things. So instead of playing them out one at a time, you can just click this and it'll automatically play out all your cards left from right. And I wasn't sure how to feel about that, because while that is useful, and when you get further into the game, you might get a hand of like 5 or 6 cards that do a random thing. I think that it feels sort of like a band-aid. It feels sort of like a band-aid over a game design issue that they discovered partway through development and just decided to add that at the end. That might be wrong. I might be completely wrong about that, but that's the way it feels to me, because it feels like instead of doing that, what could have happened is I could have just been able to target with all of my cards. But it seems to be the type of game where they want you to be playing out your hands really quickly and going through the turns and having only a limited amount of cards. So you can see, I guess you can't see, but in this deck, there's only one card, Harvest Time, which I can use to target. Everything else is completely random. Okay, so here it's going to teach me about the time pressure gauge, what happens if you overdraw. So you see we've drawn 1 2-cost card and 1 1-cost card, putting us at a full 3 time pressure. If I draw one more, which it's going to make me do right now, it'll cause a time explosion. That damages your health. Normally you have much less health than this. That damages your health, but you still get to draw the card. But once you do that, you don't get to draw any more cards for the rest of the turn. So if you remember, I'll talk about this more later. If you remember, when we go back to the main menu, we do have options for adjusting how the time explosion works and using seeded draw order so that it's not completely random. There's a lot of different kinds of randomness injected into this game, and they've given you options to adjust for that, which I think is really cool. But it does seem like that could be considered a game design flaw, depending on how you feel about RNG in card games. So here we're going to start a brand new run. I'd like to point out, so this is another way. This in the bottom right corner, this is another way they've added options to mitigate the RNG in this game, where you can turn this on and it will tell you whether or not the next card you draw causes a time explosion. Because if you have different cost cards in your deck, you might not know if your next draw is going to put you over the time gauge cost. So they've also added this. This is an additional option for if you don't like RNG. I think they've generally done a really good job at covering all bases. I think they've done a good job at that. We can add a seed if we want to go for a specific run, of course. This here at the bottom center, it's sort of like ascension levels in Slay the Spire, where we can adjust it to give us a higher difficulty if we've already completed the game once, which leads to a lot of replayability. It also has a -1, which I do appreciate. It's a casual mode for if you're not into the hyper difficult stuff and just want to enjoy a nice casual run. That's an additional option they have there. We also have starting effects, which are more options to adjust different ways to make your run feel different after you play the game a lot. I've only unlocked this first one. I'm not going to worry about this for now, but I did feel like pointing out the option. As you can see, we have a total of 3 decks in the game. I've completed the game once using the basic starter deck, and I unlocked this. I played a few rounds with this. I will say, I do think they've done a really good job at differentiating the different kinds of play patterns and mechanics that you have throughout both of these decks. So neither of them feel the same for the most part. I'm not sure about the third one because I still haven't unlocked it. I haven't beat a run using this deck, but I'm going to show you the first deck for now. Also, this whole game, like I said, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the aesthetic of the game, because you're playing as like a time traveling corporation that's starting a farm. So you sort of have this tape deck that you're going through, where you're like looking over the timeline. It has this big CRT effect on it, which I do like. It just feels weird in terms of what you're doing to me. It feels weird to me in terms of what you're doing in the game. So let's start up a game. Now, you may notice that this looks very familiar. Like I said, like I always say, generally with roguelites, after Slay the Spire came out, every single roguelite deck builder card game has basically copied the entire look and feel. So as you can see, this is basically the Slay the Spire style map. However, it doesn't exactly play like Slay the Spire, I will say. So we have a whole map for all 3 acts, much like Slay the Spire. We have different sections we can go to. These are regular. A year is basically the term for an encounter. We have our encounters, we have event spaces, we have shops, we have elites or mid bosses, which are harsh years, and then we have treasure chests. Basically the same layout as Slay the Spire, which I'm okay with. I do feel like this is just my opinion on roguelite deck builders in general. I feel like they can afford to sort of stray a little bit away from the Slay the Spire school of game design. However, it is a really well-designed game. So I will say I'm not that peeved that people are copying it, but I do think maybe people go a little bit too hard into it. I also like this fabric texture we have on the map. So I'm going to go here. So this is our starting board. We have 1 flower. We have 4 spaces. You may notice as we go through the game, as we accrue more plants, it does kind of have a little bit of a Plants vs. Zombies style aesthetic with our little plants with happy little faces on them. So I've drawn it. Whenever you click this, it draws multiple cards in a row until your next draw could cause a time explosion. So you see here we've drawn a 2-cost card and a 1-cost card, putting us at a total of 3. I also didn't point this out before, but on your time gauge, when you reach the maximum level on your time gauge, it triggers an effect. Later on, you can see we can add more effects to our time gauge, but the current effect at the very top of our time gauge is trigger global growth once, which basically means it adds 1 growth to every plant on the board, which is only 1 right now. So as you can see, we have 3 cards left in our deck. We can still draw more cards, even if it would cause a time explosion. We have 2 cards that cost 0, which means it would not cause a time explosion 2 out of 3 times. So I'm going to choose to risk it. Unfortunately, we draw exactly the one that causes an explosion. However, I believe on the first turn, the first time you do that, it doesn't do damage to your health, but the next time we do a time explosion, it will. And you can see now since we've caused a time explosion this turn, we can't draw for the rest of our turn, so these 2 are going to be stuck in our deck. So I'm just going to start by playing out all my cards and ending my turn. So you can see this isn't exactly like Slay the Spire, where we have enemies that we have to target and we have to deal a certain amount of damage to their health. We don't have like a super huge interplay of enemies. This is more of a score attack style game, sort of like Balatro, which makes this a little bit, even though it seems to be primarily based off of Slay the Spire, it has exceedingly different gameplay and very different goal. So now we can't do anything, so we can end our turn. This is turn 2. So you can see up at this top of the bar, this is the time gauge for the whole year. So each of these posts are seasons. So we started at summer, we took our turn, and then we moved to spring, or sorry, where are we? Spring, summer, fall, and then winter. So right now we are on summer. That is our second turn. And after we get after we get to winter and we take our turn, that's going to be our last turn this year. If we don't make it to our score goal, which is 23, then we lose the run. Or we kind of lose the run, which you'll see when I explain in a bit. So now, again, I have 3 cards that can be played basically for free, and 1 card that I have to use to target. And you can see this is sort of where this comes in, where a lot of the time, as you go through the game, you'll just be clicking this button and then using your 1 card that targets, and then that's your whole turn. We draw. I can choose to draw again if I want. That still causes time explosion, unfortunately. I click the autoplay button, and then I target. And then I end turn. That tends to be the basic gameplay loop for the most part. Things do change depending on what types of plants you get and depending on what other cards you get. But a lot of the time, if you get more of these random cards or cards that don't require targeting, a lot of the time what ends up happening is you're just clicking this button every turn. It is a very satisfying sound, I will say. I think the sound design in this game is amazing. With the exception of the music, not that the music's bad. I do think it is a very good background song. However, there's only 1 song in this game. This is the only song as far as I know. And it's on loop constantly. So you see when I end current year, which is end of the game, and if I haven't met my score goal, I lose the run. You'll see as we go into the map phase, we'll get my prizes. I really like the way they did these sort of 3D looking card packs. I think they're really good. It's really satisfying. You'll see the same music is still playing and it continues into the map mode. And that's one of my small problems with the game is that there's only 1 song and it's on loop constantly. It's a good song. Don't get me wrong, it is a very good song. However, I do wish there was a little bit more to it. So as you can see, much like Slay the Spire, at the end of every match or at the end of every battle, or I guess in this case year, at the end of every year, we get loot. We get gold and then usually a card pack, and that gives us a choice of 3 things. I'm going to choose Colony Moss. So in this game, there are a lot of different kinds of specific synergies between plant types. And what I found is that you really want to try to invest early in one specific plant type, because once you get into the mid game, maybe after the first boss, the game becomes extremely difficult. I think this game is unforgiving. So it becomes extremely difficult if you haven't spec'd into one specific plant type synergy. And it ends up being a problem where you might pick up some early plants and cards that go toward one specific synergy and then just never get them again, and then you instantly lose because the rate at which the score attack ramps up is much faster than you expect. And I do think that's a little bit of a problem in terms of RNG with this game. This game, like I said, this game has a lot of RNG in it. So what I'd like to do, so here's something we learned during the tutorial. You can actually sell plants and cards, not your starting deck cards, but you can sell plants and cards while you're in the middle of the game, which is really interesting. I feel like I've never really seen another game do something like that. And I'm wondering if it's the kind of thing that ends up leading to fewer interesting deck building decisions, because if you buy a card and then you realize, I don't need it, you can immediately sell it off. So what I'm going to do here, this plant has 1 growth on it. In order to be optimal, what I think I want to do is I want to get its growth up so I don't waste that 1 growth. I'm going to sell it, And then I'm going to play this Colony Moss, because what I've learned during playing this game is that if you have too many plants on the field that don't synergize with each other, it ends up wasting your cards, because each of these only increases the growth of a random plant by 1. So if you have 2 different plants that are going towards 2 different types of goals, and they're both randomly getting growth, then what ends up happening is you don't get enough gold to reach your target KPI. So I believe it's optimal to spec specifically into one type of plant very early, so that you can start getting ready to look for specific cards later on. I'm going to choose to do this. So what I found is that the time explosion actually surprisingly isn't too harsh of a punishment, especially early game, because there are a lot of really good sources of healing that you end up running into. So I actually don't need to worry that much. I'm going to do 2 of these. So occasionally you'll run into instances where you don't necessarily want to hit the play all button because you want to play specific cards before others. But like I said, you end up running into a lot of sources of healing. So it's actually not that big of a punishment that you take a little bit of damage, because as all card gamers know, health is a resource. Like this guy, it can restore health. However, we've chosen to go the path of the Colony Moss, so I must invest only in Colony Moss, which powers up when you have more Colony Moss on the field. I'm going to go to an event space. So this guy, I wasn't sure. I keep on going back and forth on whether or not I want this. So this is a thing that can't be sold and can't be moved. And since we have it really early, I'm going to click this button. It's going to show us our board. We only have 4 spots on our farm right now, which means if I get it now, I'm going to have to either place it somewhere where I don't know if I want it, or I'm going to have to keep it in my deck. And every time I draw through my deck, it's going to be wasting a deck slot. So I think I might actually leave this one alone. Much like Slay the Spire and much like every other roguelite deck builder that's come after it, we have a choice between 3 choices. I'm going to take a little bit of damage. It's going to give me +1 on my, I guess I can't see it right now, +1 on my time gauge, which lets me basically draw 1 extra card, which means for our purposes, because I only have a total of 4 time gauge cost, I can basically draw every card in my deck without worrying about anything. And I play my second time moss, and you see these both get a bonus from having other colony moss on the field. So whenever one colony moss gains a growth, the other one gains growth, which means I can just play all these out and they'll give me a large amount of gold. So now, like I've said, you reach points in this game where the turns just amount to drawing all your cards, hitting the play all button, and then using your 1 card that you have to target. End turn, draw all cards, play all cards. And it does end up being a little bit satisfying to go through every round really quickly if you know you can. But I'm wondering if just having a button that says play every single card might be a game design issue. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. I'm going to choose to go to a shop here. So here's one of our free sources of healing. Whenever you enter a shop, you get to heal for free for 40% of your health. Amazing. 6 gold, not a big deal. It's basically free. So we have 40 gold here. Most of the basic common cards cost 20 gold. Here we have our expand field. So in, say, Slay the Spire or a lot of other games, usually the shop has an option to remove a card from your deck. Here, we want to expand our field as much as possible because it's optimal to try and fill out your field with flowers and buildings and things, because even though you can take a little bit of damage from time explosions, it is more optimal to not have cards trapped in your deck because they have too high of a time cost. So it's better to get more cards that immediately get played out onto the field and benefit you during the game versus adding cards to your deck that you have to hope to draw. And if you get a time explosion, then you can't draw it. So I'm going to leave it there. But as you can see, whenever we expand the field, the price permanently goes up, and it's like that for the rest of the run. So in order for us to expand the field without wasting our money on that, what we want to try to do is fight these guys. And I'll show you why in a second. This is a fun one. So we get 3 boxes that will randomly give us a prize. We love gacha. I realized that I think the best way to do this, so after you get your free roll on this, you get to choose between low chance, medium chance, and high chance. They cost different amounts of gold to open, but they give you a higher chance of getting higher amounts of gold. So I realized if you just keep rolling the low chance box, so you can see if I open it, it costs 15 gold, which I'll gladly spend. The lowest amount of gold on this roulette is 30, so no matter what, even if you roll the lowest one, you're always gaining gold. And you see the price of opening a box went up to 28, so I'll also open a low chance box because no matter what, I'm gaining money. It's free. And that's technically only gaining 2 gold, but it's still, you know, it's still gaining gold. I'm going to go here. I'm going to heal. Like I said, we get lots of sources of free healing. We don't at all have to worry about taking too much damage. Health is a resource. I'm going to refresh because what you want to try and get your synergies as early as possible, because if you don't get them early and you go into the late game and you're still looking for your synergies, you're probably going to die by the time you get to the second boss. Unfortunately, it looks like we've gotten nothing here. I'm going to buy one of these just in case, and we will let it go. So like I said, if we don't want to spend too much money on buying field expansions because the price goes up every time, we want to fight these guys, or we want to go through a harsh year, which is like an elite fight in Slay the Spire. It will give us a field expansion as a bonus. So these are harsh years. Normally, it's just a regular score attack game. When you reach harsh year, there's an additional penalty or challenge aspect that they add to it. So here it's gain 1 parasite for every 6 spell cards played. We're not too worried about that. I'm going to play out my windmill, which gets me gold every time I harvest an adjacent plant. So I'm gonna put those out there. So I don't really have to worry about the parasites too much because I'm not going to be playing cards that often. I'm just going to play those out. I'm going to cheeky try to draw 1 more. Excellent. We're going to end our turn. We're going to draw all of our cards. We're going to cheeky try to draw 1 more. Now, here's something that I want to show you. So you may notice we're on our last turn of the year and I haven't reached my goal yet. Fortunately, you don't necessarily lose. You do lose the round, but you don't necessarily lose the run. What happens is if you end without meeting your score goal, you lose health equal to the remainder. So I lose 14 health for not meeting KPI, which means I'm now at 17 health. But it's fine because in elite fights or in harsh years, you also get to regain health. Like I said, you get a field expansion that you don't have to waste money on. And later on, I do like getting evaporating dewdrops. I think those are good. I would like to go for a shop here because it's really important that I actually try to find my colony moss, because if I don't find the colony moss, then I think I lose this run. This feels really bad, and now I can't refresh anymore. Unfortunate. Well, let's go into another harsh year. All plants' growth cycles are increased by 1. I think that's okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start spending health. I'm going to start spending health. Oh yeah, additionally, I don't think I ever explained this, but sometimes when you do certain things, like each turn gain 1 evaporating dewdrop for every 5 spell cards played, you get a thing called a product card, which is basically like a token that goes into your deck. And when you end your turn, it activates all product cards that are in your deck. I only have one in my deck, so it only does one. But trust me, I've gotten like 10, 20 of them in my deck, and it spends them all at once. It's really cool and satisfying. So I'm just going to overdraw every single turn. I'm going to take a little bit of damage, but it's worth it to make it to my score, which I might actually not even do. No, unfortunately. So here is another thing I wanted to show you. If you take lethal damage from the amount of damage that you take because you haven't met your score goal, it's a game over, but they do give you an opportunity to restart the year, which is really cool because there is a little bit of RNG in this game. What I found was the RNG isn't actually that detrimental to the point where you're going to be restarting years. It's not detrimental to the point where you're going to be restarting years due to RNG to try and get a more favorable run. It's that there are ways that you could definitely better optimize your gameplay. And it looks like I've died again. There are ways that you can better optimize your gameplay where sometimes if you've done something wrong, maybe you realize, oh, I should have done that, and that would have given me a chance to win. So we're just going to die here. Now, I just wanted to show you one more thing before we left it off, because that's basically the entire gameplay loop, with the exception of we didn't get to see any bosses. But the bosses are basically the same as the harsh years, but what happens is you get, I believe it's like 3 years in a row, so you get like 12 turns before it ends the match. I just wanted to show off our second deck. It does have a little bit of different gameplay. So this has a lot of adding products to your deck type effects. So once we enter here, I'm just going to go to a random space because I'm not going through a whole playthrough. So we have a different starting flower. It gains 2 gold when you harvest it and gives you a random product, which are, like I explained, the things that go into your deck. We have a lot of cards in this deck that basically add products to your deck or interact with adding products to your deck. The other one, you do that sort of thing, but not as much. So like you see here, we have a whole bunch of different kinds of things. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit end turn. We're going to play out a whole bunch of those. So like I said, you can get up to like 20 or 30 different kinds of things in your deck. It ends up being really cool. Just going to go through this. I'm not worried about dying here. And we end turn here. Okay, so this deck has different kinds of cards. So as you can see, we have different cards that we're drafting, much like the classes in Slay the Spire. And this deck is actually mostly focused on, I guess we're not actually going to see it. You can see it in the description of this one. We get Chicken Mission. This deck is mostly focused on having animals on the board instead of plants. So we'll have animals on the board, and most of the animals end up having end turn effects, and it's really cool. I do think they've done a really good job at differentiating the gameplay of the different kinds of decks, because what I was worried about is based on, I don't know why I hit that button. Sure, whatever. Based on the gameplay that you see here, where, like I said, you do end up getting into loops of drawing cards, playing all your cards, and then ending turn. Draw all your cards, play all your cards, and then end the turn. While a lot of the time it does end up being that, I do think, because of the way they've designed the game, every deck does feel different, and each deck has multiple different kinds of gameplay styles that you can sort of spec into that I think are really cool. So yes, that is Rana card. A very unique... It's kind of funny because I have been pointing out all the ways that it's similar to Slay the Spire, but it is a very interesting, unique roguelite deck builder farming management game that does a lot of cool and unique things that help differentiate it from every single other roguelite deck builder in existence. So yes, that is Rana card. It is available for $16.99 on Steam or your regional equivalent. My name has been Tokimaru. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.